1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are back with us. We are back in the DFS lab. As always, this show presented by 1 week season, where we build a DraftKings lineup and use that to focus on the upcoming slate. In this case, it is week 13. You'll be watching this on Friday, the 29th of November. Happy Black Friday. Hopefully you've got some, you're able to find some good deals, whether it be online or in the real world. A little bit of some schedule adjustments this week just because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Of course, we're actually recording this show, myself and Papy, on Wednesday, and so just had to kind of adjust the schedule a little bit. So we obviously, you're watching this on Friday. Thanksgiving slate has already happened, but for our purposes recording it, the Thanksgiving slate is still it's still in the future. And so just kind of an interesting thing to touch on there. But with all that said, I'm your host, Cheeseman, and welcome. Happy to have you guys with us. And now welcoming up Papy. So Papy, again, recording this on Wednesday. So happy Thanksgiving, as it hasn't happened yet. But we're obviously looking ahead towards week 13. We can't really talk about what happened on Thursday. So I'll just ask you, how was your week 12 and how's the week going with preparing for just the holiday and kind of having a different schedule than what we're normally used to?
I mean, Thanksgiving week, one of the best weeks of the year, right? You get football on Thursday, Black Friday football, and then, we're getting to get the main slate. So it's like a whole weekend of football and eating, which is, what more could you want than a whole weekend of football and eating? Week 12 was a frustrating week for me because I think, as you recall, I kind of touted the Dolphins and said, somebody's going to hit them for 30 points. And I, picked everybody but Jalen Waddle. I had, the whole Dolphins team coming and going, except didn't have Waddle nearly as much in there as I needed to, and way too much Hill. So, and I remember I read when I was reading the Edge, because, even though I write one of the games, I'm still mostly an Edge reader. And, JM had in there something like, wouldn't it just be like DFS for Waddle to, go for 40 this weekend? Hill does nothing. And I knew I was going to play a lot of Dolphins. And so when I read that, that's why I remembered it, because I knew I was going to be lighter on Waddle than the other guys. And I was like, I bet you it's going to be that. And then of course it was. And I'm sitting here kicking myself saying, like, why you knew to play more Waddle, but at the same time, if it would have been Hill that went crazy and played a bunch of Waddle, you'd feel the same way, so that's DFS.
That is so DFS for you, man. I completely agree. How many times has that happened where it's just like the guy who was such the clear on paper play, and you're like, I'm locking this dude, and then the other guy goes off. I will say, though, on this show last week, you talked up Will Levis, and he definitely was a solid play. He didn't go for a huge score, but definitely a solid score, and would have been better, I think, had they thrown just a little bit more in the second half. I think Calvin Ridley had 93 yards receiving at the half and didn't even have a reception in the second half. So that was kind of a bummer. I had some Calvin Ridley, and I was like, oh, I should have played some Will Levis. It was a tough click for me. I'll be honest, just because the Will Levis brand name is this dude who has all these memes for the hilarious mistakes he's made on the field, but it was a solid play.
So, yeah, I mean, to talk about pain, I actually played Levis on my main team, which was really hard to do because it was a very speculative. He was like 0.9%, and I had him stacked with Ridley, and I had Nico as the bringback, and they both finished with 90 some yards, and I think Levis had 280 or something. And if you were watching that game, they threw a touchdown to Nico with a 40-yard touchdown that would have given him the bonus, given him a second TD. I mean, he would have been exploding at the end of the game. And it would have also then given the Titans the ball back, losing, right? And so they would have then Levis had to throw, and they both could have gotten the bonus.
I did not realize that.
Too. Yeah, and they called back the touchdown to Nico on an illegal shift, just two men moving, and it was totally irrelevant to the play. And that, I was losing my mind. That was, that would have really, put me up into the money there. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Now the Titans are going to get the ball back. Ridley's going to get the bonus. Levis is going to get the bonus.
Yes.
Nico's going up. And then they call it back, and it was from that point, it was the worst. They missed a field goal to tie it. There was no overtime. And I'm just sitting here saying all these guys are gonna miss the bonus now, take away touchdown, and you lose. Obviously, it's a huge difference on that. So that moment cut me deep this week.
Dude, well, props to you, man, for having the stones to play Will Levis in your main build. I know that's a pretty high entry fee. What is it? The luxury box, the game changer that is your kind of your main build a lot of weeks, something like that.
I always play it in the Wildcat. It was the 550,
Wow.
so I had it in the
Damn.
550 this weekend. So yeah, I mean, I bet the most
That would have been, you would have jumped big time if that, because again, yeah, you're right. Like Will Levis, dude, 24 pass attempts, but I mean, I don't know if like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with him. If we can even start to wonder if he's actually a legitimate QB, but he's been slinging it. Not that we want to spend a whole show on Will Levis here.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But he had, I have a lot of them in best ball too, which those playoffs are coming up soon, which should be fun. So hopefully he can get his act together.
Absolutely, dude. Well, let's look at week 13. I actually really am excited about this slate. We do not have the ability to see ownership at this point, just because it's obviously, again, recording this on Wednesday. But yeah, when you look at this slate, you have. I'll just go ahead and pull up DraftKings here. You have. This game between Philly and Baltimore, that's going to be, it's certainly going to attract a lot of eyeballs, a lot of attention. Just a great real life football game, of course. Two great teams, two great quarterbacks. Philly's defense has been very good, but you also have some other game environments as well that will be interesting. I mean, I really have been excited to play pieces from this Colts and Patriots game with two quarterbacks that are running quarterbacks, Drake May, Anthony Richardson, and also Tampa Bay at Carolina. So, Tampa Bay offense has been good. So where do you want to go first? Let's just, I guess, even though we don't have ownership to look at yet, I would definitely say that, to me, Bucky Irving for Tampa Bay I think he should be the highest owned player on the slate. Maybe there's one or two other ones that I'm not thinking of, but just his price, his role, it seems like he should be highly owned. I think pieces from Philly, Baltimore will be owned. But any initial thoughts for you in terms of, what do you think about Bucky Irving's ownership, and then any other ownership thoughts you have, even though we don't have ownership to look at? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot of places to go on this slate. I think in the last couple slates, it was like there weren't a lot of great games. You were sort of hunting for places to go. And this one, it's like there's too many, appealing places to go. I think that Irving is going to have probably one of the highest ownerships on the slate. I think his ownership last week was relatively high, and his price didn't move that much. And this is a better matchup. It's interesting because he's not really in a workhorse role. Like if you look at his usage and he's sharing a lot with White. I didn't look up their snap percentage, but I think that they both played like 12 attempts and 6 targets. Now that's not bad, but it's not necessarily like a workhorse, what we'd think of a workhorse. But he's been so efficient and looks like such a good player, and he has such a great matchup, and he's affordable. He's not priced like guys who you expect to get that sort of workhorse role. So yeah, I mean, he's a great play. I think he will be one of the highest owned players on the slate. I would suspect. I think also there's some pay up pieces that are probably if you want to get into some of the higher total games, like if you wanted to stack the Ravens and Eagles game and you want to pay up for AJ Brown, it's like Irving is going to make that possible. So I think you probably will see a lot of builds like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes we have seen instances this season of like the clear and away like game environment that seems like the one you may have to have, where this Philly Baltimore game, you kind of get a sense of, could this be a really high scoring game? But because the pieces are expensive, you could see people shying away from it a little bit. Do you think that will happen here? You think that people will be trying to stack like a Lamar, Zay Flowers, or a Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown type of stack?
I think people are going to play that game heavily. I think it's going to be the most heavily played game of the week. I think people will see Tampa Bay pieces as favorable, but they'll also think like Carolina won't fight back enough for them to all totally reach their highest ceiling range. Even though I don't necessarily agree with that, I think people will think that. I think in the other, I think the Pittsburgh Cincy game, which I'm going to be writing up for this week on The Edge, is a very interesting game to me because that's a high total game. But if you watch like Steelers football, their offense isn't very good and their defense is very good. And then the Bengals are basically the exact opposite. Their offense is very good and their defense is terrible. So it's this, weakness on weakness and strength on strength matchup. And those have a lot of different outcomes. Like I don't see that if I'm gonna bet the total in that game, I'm probably going the under. But we'll see. I think it's an interesting game when I break it down for the edge and write that and get that out, which it's gonna be interesting. So I think people will avoid that though, because I think they'll see like Pittsburgh defense. I don't really want to play a lot of Bengals against the Pittsburgh defense, and then they'll be like Pittsburgh offense kind of isn't very good. So I don't think people will be super on that game. So I think it's going to be the Philly game, like the Philly-Baltimore game. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of ownership, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. And the final thought that I'll say before we kind of jump into the build here is that just because the ownership on Bucky Irving will be high, and because Carolina just sees a high rush rate against them because normally teams are controlling the game, I think that Baker Mayfield will fall in this range. And just the Tampa Bay passing attack, that they aren't going to be highly owned. Baker is his price is creeping up to the point where he becomes just the brand name of Baker Mayfield. It's hard for people to pay almost $7K for him at quarterback. So while I'm not saying that's a spot that I will definitely go or you should go, I just think it's something that if the ownership on Bucky Irving will be high, potential leverage spot or maybe an overstack. But that's kind of the final thought that I've got. So in case you got anything else, you ready to jump into the build here?
Let's get the $20 Millie Maker build going.
Yes, sir, man. Let's do it. Yep, the Millie is what we're attacking here. Where do you want to go first with this lineup?
So we're gonna start with Anthony Richardson.
Like it.
And I think he's gonna be a little bit underowned for his 30-point potential and his criminally low price. I mean, he's priced like a guy who's really almost a backup coming in and taking over. I mean, and he is not necessarily a great real-life football player. In fact, he probably has the biggest gap in his real-life football value and his fantasy value of anyone. But in our game, he is a valuable player because so much of his production comes on the ground. And he basically gets 40 yards rushing a week, and he obviously has the upside for much more than that. And so, like every week that he starts, it's like he's getting 30-plus yards rushing pretty much every week. And his ability to score on the ground is as high as any QB because they run him on the goal. I mean, he's almost like a Cam. People remember prime Cam Newton. He almost has that sort of feel around the goal line where it's like you just run him and he's like a power back. So, he could so easily get 40 yards rushing and a touchdown, and it's like that's 10 fantasy points right there with nothing else. And at his price, I mean, he's really got a tough time failing. He's probably not failing. So I think he's a good place to go for his price. And he could get 30. He could have 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He could get 30 just on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I am not going to argue with you on the Anthony Richardson play. If I had to guess right now, I'd say he's going to be my highest owned QB this coming weekend, without a doubt. Yeah, I love the play.
And so I don't even think you necessarily need to pair him with anything, but in the Millie Maker, we're going to stack, and we're going to pair him with Michael Pittman. And Pittman is really cheap. I think he's 5,300.
Yeah. Yep. 52.
52. So not even 53. And if you look at Pittman, the last 2 games he's seen 8-9 targets. So he was the wide receiver 1 coming in to the year. We expected him to be a pretty good player based on his performance last year and his rapport with Richardson last year. And he's priced like a, mid-range wide receiver 2, if that. So I think he's an easy pairing to throw in there with Richardson.
Absolutely. Yeah, man.
All right, we're going to bring it back with Hunter Henry at tight end. And Hunter Henry again. He's 4,200. I think if you click on his scores here, you'll see that he has 8-9 targets the last 2 weeks. 4 weeks ago 8 targets. So realistic to say, he has 7 to 9 target expectation. The Colts get beat up by tight ends. They're not good against the tight end. Tight end. There's stats. Tight ends at home perform better. He's at home, so. I think there's just a lot of favorable factors here for him. I think that if he gets 7 to 9 targets, which is probably a fair projection range for him, that he's going to get, 8 to 10 fantasy points probably for sure. And if he finds the end zone, he'll have a 16 to 20 point day. And I think 4.2K, that's a pretty good range. So I think Henry makes a lot of sense as a bring back here.
Oh yeah, man. I love Hunter Henry, and he has not scored a touchdown he actually only has one touchdown all season. And I'm not sure what his I have no idea what his red zone role is, but I absolutely think that, you take 8 or 9 targets for him. If you add a touchdown, that's a smash for him at his price.
Yeah. So I think he's a nice play this week, especially if you're going to go with a Richardson and Pittman, stack to bring it back. So at wide receiver, we're going to go ahead and play Drake London, and he's going to be sort of a mid-priced one-off here for us. He's just too affordable for how good he's been. And, the Chargers defense has been quite good, but it has been vulnerable through the air. So this is a matchup where you think he could see 8 to 10 targets, and he's just affordable for that. He's a number 1 receiver in a good offense at home, good player. The matchup should favor passing, and he's 6,500. So, it's a one-off play that I think makes sense. He could be the guy that ends up with 100 yards and a touchdown on Atlanta if Atlanta offense has a good day.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yep. Plugged him in. So we still got the 2 running back slots, 5,700 a play remaining at this point.
Yep. And we're going to stay sort of in the same value range here at receiver. We're going to put in T Higgins. Now this is a play basically with the idea of Higgins is sort of too cheap for his production to date. If you click on him, I was a little impressed by how much he's been used. I didn't really, necessarily think I sort of think of him as not quite having as much usage as Jamar Chase, but it's really relatively similar. And this is based on the idea that Joey Porter will shadow Jamar Chase. And, it's interesting with Porter. He will probably shadow Chase. He has shadowed Chase in the past. They think of Chase as the best receiver. He actually probably has a better body type to take away Higgins, but I don't think they'll use him that way. I think I think he wants Chase. I think that's a matchup he wants. And I think that they're going to use him that way. And Joey Porter Jr. is very good. And so if they have him chase, and, that was not planned. That just came, it's just realized have him, chase. Then Higgins is likely to see a spike in his target volume. And that's where, the Steelers defense can kind of be had sometimes is going away from Porter. So that's why I think, Higgins is an interesting play this week. I don't think he'll be popular. I don't think people will look at it that way. And it could be the type of situation where it's the wide receiver 2, sort of like Waddle last week, who ends up being the one who has the big day there.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I love that's a very sharp angle to take there, just because I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, Joey Porter, we've seen him take away top receivers multiple times this season, and so I think that's a great shout.
So now we got. Let's go ahead and throw our cheap defense in here quickly before we do our running backs. So you know where to go. Go down to the bottom. We're gonna throw not all the way. Not all the way. We're gonna throw in the Jets here. And the Jets defense is probably an above average unit overall. They're at home, and they're taking on Seattle, who has been a turnover prone offense at times. So I think that that's really all there is to it. Is, again, defense is high variance. I'm almost always willing to play a very cheap defense to save money, because you just don't know, and especially if they're at home in a decent unit, like an average to above average unit, they could get a defensive touchdown. Like you just don't really know. So I'm always willing to go cheap on defense. All right. So now running back, we're going to go up at running back here, and we're going to play Joe Mixon. This is just what Texan do you really want to play against the Jaguars? Like, the Jaguars defense is so bad. Somebody hurts them every single week. And it's going to probably be Nico or Tank or maybe even Dalton Schultz, but the most likely guy is Mixon. In matchups that the Texans have controlled, Mixon has pretty much had a good game every single time. And there's no reason to really think that he's not going to have a good game. I mean, he's coming off his worst game of the season, but a much different matchup there. And if you look at the games that the Texans have won or controlled, like he pretty much has a good game every time. So I feel like as far as just picking my Texan, which Texan is gonna hurt them, I'll go with Mixon. I'll probably have Texans, throughout my lineups, almost like one Texan per lineup, because it just feels to me like there's very little chance someone on the Texans isn't having a big day. So for this lineup, we'll go with Mixon.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and Mixon, 20 running back opportunity, 20 more running back opportunities. And in every game, in this entire game log that I have without scrolling, but the last 5. But I mean, against the Colts, he had 31, 4 or more targets in 4 of the last 5 games. I love this spot for him. Absolutely.
All right, so now we're down to the last 2 spots, and these are the 2 spots on the lineup that I feel the most like I could do different things with here. And so for when I say that, I mean like you could put Kamara in here, you could put Hall in here, you can go cheap at second running back with a guy like Irving, and you could spend more on your flex. I think there's a lot of ways from this spot here in the build to do different things, and so. The one that I'm gonna use just for this to show it is to go ahead and put in Kamara. And so if you put him in there, and I think he's in a great spot at home, a lot of passing game volume, not a lot of reason to think he'll fail. So I think he's a good play. But again, you could put a lot of different guys in that second RB slot and justify it. And now when we come down to the flex, this is what I'm sort of going to call like cheap wide receiver based on injury questions. And no, we don't have all of the injury news right now. The one that I'm going to put into this lineup, just because he fits price wise and he's one of the guys in this category, is Dotson, who is incredibly speculative. Don't get me wrong here. I mean, he has not done anything this year, but he played 69% of the snaps last week without Devonta Smith. And if Smith misses again this week, which I think he has a hammy and it looks like he might, it is the Baltimore Philly game, and it's a player that nobody is going to have and could be the guy who hurts the Baltimore, suspect secondary. So, I think he's worth considering in a large field, Millie Maker type lineup. As a way to sort of, rather than just fade that game, because this lineup sort of fades the game, I think is going to be the most popular, to say, all right, well, I'll actually go ahead and sneak in with a guy who's pretty speculative, but could be in the wide receiver 2 role. Him and Johnny Wilson played, I think, almost the exact same number of snaps. Johnny Wilson is like he's min priced, and he played 70% of the snaps last week too. But, going for Dotson here. The other options that you would have here would be like Jalen McMillan is 3,700. You could take out Dotson, put in McMillan, and he sort of functioned as the Bucs wide. It's almost like the same thing. Like he played a lot. He sort of functioned as the wide receiver 2 on the Bucs, but they didn't use him at all. And it's another situation where like people are going to have the Bucs. They're going to have Evans. They're going to have Bucky Irving, right? They're going to have some Cade Otton, but almost no one's going to have McMillan because they didn't use him. But he was on the field a ton, and, he probably will get used more. So he's sort of a similar play to Dotson, where you could use him. And then there's one more cheap guy at 3,500 more for Carolina is another cheap guy. And he played like 98% of the snaps last week. But you really have to, make sure that Colker doesn't come back, the other Panthers receiver, because that will probably be a split situation when he does. So it's another injury question where, depending on who plays, he could be another cheap wide receiver. So I think any of these 3 guys, assuming, they're all in the wide receiver 2 role where, based on injury, they are on the field all the time, are viable. They're not all high probability hits, but there's a good chance one of them could catch a long touchdown, and that guy could give you a huge boost if you get him right. And this is the way that, again, you can play this lineup with 2 expensive RBs. You can also drop down on Kamara, play a guy like Bucky, play a more expensive flex. So I think there's some different options here.
Absolutely, different ways you can go. Mm-hmm. Cool, dude. Well, you want me to just put Dotson in for the purposes of this?
Plug in Dotson for the purposes of this one.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. Well, that finishes it. And for those listening on the pod, we ended up with Anthony Richardson at the QB stack with Michael Pittman, and then Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara at the running backs, and then Drake London, T. Higgins, Hunter Henry, Jahan Dotson, Jets defense. Pappy, sharp stuff as always, man. Any final thoughts on this before we close this one out and send the people off to get ready for week 13 here?
No, I'm excited for this slate. Like I said, it's a fun slate. We have the Thanksgiving slate in between, and also get in there. Traditionally for me in DFS, I don't go as hard on the Thanksgiving Day slate. I've never really done that well on the Thanksgiving Day slate. I always feel like I do well betting on Thanksgiving, and then I lose in DFS and I break even and I get, 10 pounds heavier, and it's a fun day. So we'll see if it's a similar Thanksgiving to the one it's been in the past. But happy Thanksgiving to the OWS family, and hope everyone has a great week 13.
Yes, guys, happy Thanksgiving. As always, make sure to head to oneweekseason.com. They have got some Black Friday promotions going on. So given that it is Black Friday when you'll be watching this, definitely check it out and see if you'd like to give One Week Season a try. A lot of good stuff over there to just help you be a better DFS player. Pappy, thanks, man. We'll catch you guys next time.